Things moving in the shade. 12 years, 4 months, and 20 days after Longview. I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. John Adams. Come on in, Jeff, said General John Corbett Morgan. Close the door. The big Kentucky mountain man's black beard and hair were now flecked with gray, but he was still impressive and bulky in his green and khaki NDF uniform, and the measurement of his barrel chest was still greater than his waist even in middle age. A tendency to trade off the top jobs between old NVA vets and the Northwest Republic's government had appeared over the past dozen years, and so John Morgan was now into his third year as NDF Chief of Staff here at Fort Lewis, Washington, while his old comrade in arms from volunteer days, Carter Wingfield, now held down his old Council of State portfolio as Minister of Defense in Olympia. Colonel Jeff Garrison, who now entered the office, was tall and mustachioed, a 35-year-old senior analyst from CMI Combined Military Intelligence. He stood to attention and saluted. "I got your latest update, Colonel," said Morgan. "I need to go over it with you, and I asked Air Marshal Basquine and Admiral Leach to sit in." Air Marshal Billy Basquine, in light powder blue, was the Luftwaffe's head of service or commanding general. Bloody Dave Leach, in dark blue serge with an anchor behind the eagle and swastika on his uniform, was now the Kriegsmarine Hose. Leach had been a former U.S. Navy sailor. Before the War of Independence, he came from a traditional seagoing family, and after his stint as a flying column commander, and then ramrodding Force 101 What Force 101, he returned to his original love, the sea. "Have a seat and tell us all what all's got you so hot and bothered," said Morgan. With a gesture toward a chair, Garrison sat down and plugged a thumb drive into the computer terminal on Morgan's desk before him. The computer was on a small intranet that connected only to the second workstation in the room, the plasma display screen on one wall, and a special underground fiber optic connection, the state president's own personal computer in his office in Olympia. The intranet had a new encryption code every month, and no connection wired or wireless to the internet or any other station, making it impossible to hack from the outside. Garrison authenticated himself to the terminal with a voice code, a thumbprint, and a retinal scan before the machine would accept and upload the data from his portable drive. The upload was slowed down a bit by security scanning software. So far, there had been only one serious computer system hack carried out by the United States Office of Northwest Recovery against any network in the Republic's government, in the second year after independence. An American saboteur gained entry to the Bureau of State Security's main office, dressed in a Civil Guard officer's uniform. He delivered some genuine but routine paperwork to a secretary, then he dropped a smoke grenade that set off a fire alarm. In the confusion, he slipped a malware DVD into the machine on her desk, which uploaded a destructive virus onto the system, but which also triggered an alarm on the PC. The spy was apprehended and shot trying to get out a window. His virus was nabbed and quarantined by the IT technician on duty, but it had already destroyed 80% of the data on the server. Boss's ironclad practice of keeping paper copies of everything in actual physical filing cabinets enabled the system to be reconstructed and brought back online within a week. Not being able instantly to network everything at the speed of light, like the Americans could, definitely slowed things down in the Republic. But it also made data and facilities infinitely more secure. In addition, the extra time and effort needed to perform many procedures manually was conducive to more acute thinking and better efficiency. The Republic had something the United States of America did not, filing clerks who actually knew how to file. Garrison got into the computer and flashed several grainy images on the plasma screen. To begin with, CMI has noticed several developments down south of the border over the past 40 to 8 hours that give us cause for concern, he told the officers. As you know, we've been intermittently hacking the American surveillance satellite system for some years now, as well as the European and Chinese satellites. They all know we're doing this. They periodically figure out how we're doing it, and they either discover a way to interdict our hack, or else in some cases they disable a whole satellite if they can't get whatever bug we've put inside it out of the system. In some of those cases, thanks to our technological warfare department and their brilliant egghead types, we have actually been able to reactivate some of these dead spy satellites and reprogram them to spy for us, to the great chagrin of the ONR and NASA. "The Lazarus birds," said Basquine with a chuckle. "You got it, sir. These photos come from a Lazarus bird, a satellite we've raised from the dead. We keep it focused on key points of interest in Aslan. Unless the ONR's computer nerds have figured out some way to hack us in turn and dick with the images, these are legitimate." "How likely is that?" asked Basquine. "I mean, how likely is it that ONR might be planting these images as disinformation?" "Nothing is certain in the weird and wonderful world of spy technology, sir, but we've matched these photos, tracked the subjects, and collated their sequences with other satellite feeds we're intercepting, and also with ground intel in California, and we're convinced this is the straight dope," Garrison told them. "Something is going on down there in the land of the hot tamale we need to be concerned with, no question." "Okay, what exactly are we looking at here?" asked Morgan, staring at the pixelated images. "The first series we see now was taken on Pier 84 and Pier 85 at the Puerto de San Diego Zona Alta Seguridad," said Garrison. "The vessels being unloaded are the Chinese freighters Hangzhou and Pan-Asian Star. Those are two mega-freighters, the biggest class in the Chicom merchant fleet, and they are offloading nothing but the same size container. Hundreds of them. One of our guys on the ground managed to get inside the perimeter posing as a wino. He was intercepted and badly beaten by assaultos for his trouble. The place is crawling with them, but he managed to report back." "The containers are being loaded onto flat cars and sent up to the El Cajon Air Base under heavy armed escort." "Not surprising," grunted Basquine. "Virtually their whole air force is Chinese or North Korean. Nobody seems to be able to teach mestizos how to fly or maintain aircraft engines. A team of operatives managed to get close enough early this morning to snap this through a telephoto lens," Garrison told them. He clicked up the next photo, showing a long row of hangars with freight containers in the middle of a cracked asphalt street. There seemed to be a lot of activity, trucks, vans, and indistinct men in blue coveralls. Garrison brought up the next shot, which depicted the open bay doors of one of the hangars, and then he clicked up the magnification to maximum. Dimly visible inside the hangar was a long, sleek metal craft on landing skids. Men on top of it seemed to be attaching a rotor. "Helicopters," said John Morgan. "They're bringing in helicopters. A whole passel of them." "Yes, sir, quite a passel," replied Garrison. "We've confirmed that is a Chinese Taipan 7 gunship. In the process of being assembled, we conjecture that the containers each carry a military helicopter. Either all Taipans, or more likely a mixture of Taipans, Dragonfly recon craft, and possibly some transport copters as well. If each container equals one chopper, then our Beaner friends down south have just acquired an armada of almost 1,000 new aircraft."
"For what purpose?"
asked Leach. "And what did the Beaners pay for all those choppers with? Aslan is just as perpetually broke as their cousins south of the Rio Grande. The Chinks don't just give away firepower like that in exchange for a few oranges and cantaloupes laced with disease." "I believe we can guess what they intend to do with their new toys, sir," said Garrison grimly. "Our computer hackers have checked incoming flights to LAX, and also into Mexico City, and there seem to be a higher than usual number of young male Chinese nationals flying in over the past week, allegedly as business travelers or tourists. Those would be the pilots and crews?" suggested Morgan. "We think so, yes, sir," confirmed Garrison. "Dispersed and carefully inserted into Aslan to try and avoid detection. Our observers on the ground break contact, and E. "Okay?" asked Leach. "Yes, sir." "But this sudden influx of air power into Aslan isn't the only item that's caught our attention of late," Garrison went on. "You gentlemen will recall that the status report for last month included a copy of some Pentagon emails detailing the combined summer exercise planned by the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Marines in North Dakota and eastern Montana, the one they call Operation Blast Furnace?" "Yeah, they're rattling their saber like they do every couple of years," said Basquine. "They're always massing troops on the border and playing war games, testing our reaction. We move our own troops up to the border and have our own war games, and we make it clear that anytime they want to come over and play with us, we're ready." "That may be what they're doing this year as well, sir, but we picked up on something that's a little disturbing," said Garrison. Earlier this year, the Canadian government in Ottawa approved a really major chunk of budget for highway reconstruction, in theory, all over the whole country. But the only place this makeover has actually begun is on two fairly insignificant rural roads, Provincial Highway 18 in Saskatchewan and Highway 501 in Alberta. Garrison clicked up a map onto the big screen. They're regrading, repaving, adding multiple lanes and strengthening bridges to bear greater loads. As you can see, both of those Canadian highways run more or less parallel to the U.S. border until 501 runs into National Highway 4 at Milk River, Alberta, right on our own border. You think the Americans may be reviving Operation North Star? Asked John Morgan keenly. Could be, sir, if President Wallace has managed to arm-twist the Canucks into going along with it, said Garrison. What's Operation North Star? Asked Air Marshal Basquine. Oh, yeah, I forgot. That was before your time, Bill, answered Morgan. One of the Pentagon's invasion plans a few years ago was called Operation North Star. It called for moving a major force into Canada, rolling west fast and hard just north of the border, and then forking and slashing down into Montana and Idaho to take Kalispell and Coeur d'Alene. Rather like the Schlieffen Plan the Germans used in World War I to hit the French through Belgium on an undefended frontier, added Colonel Garrison, who was something of a military history buff. The trouble was, the Belgians resisted and managed to slow the Germans long enough for the French and the British to react. If you're going to invade another country through a neutral nation, you need to make sure the locals stay neutral. Operation North Star fell through when the Canadian government of the time wouldn't go for it. They hate the Northwest Republic with a passion that amounts to insanity, but they also fear us. We're militarily stronger than they are, and Ottawa doesn't dare take us on alone. They know a large segment of the white population of Western Canada wants to throw in with the Republic, and they don't want to get involved in a war where they might lose all or part of their western provinces. Could that reluctance on their part have changed? Asked Leach. Maybe, said Morgan, ruminating as he ran his fingers through his beard. They've got a new prime minister now who has opened the gate to all those refugees from what used to be Israel. And in return, the Jews have backed his government with every penny and ounce of influence and propaganda they can muster, which is still mighty considerable. That's what's most worrying, said Garrison. Canada now has 1 million Israeli Jews, and the U.S. now has at least 3 million, who are screaming at the top of their lungs for revenge because they blame the Republic, correctly I think, for undermining the American Middle Eastern oil empire to the point where it collapsed. When that happened, Israel lost their American lifeline and became unsustainable. In addition to which, President Wallace is coming up for re-election for his third term this fall, and he needs to be seen taking at least some steps to recover the Northwest, as per his campaign promises when he ran on that whole Oni Spritz. One nation indivisible, my ass, growled Morgan. But I have to admit, it worked. It not only got him elected, but he's kept up the drumbeat. And with the Jews backing him, he's managed actually to get some things done and halt the USA's slide into complete chaos, at least somewhat. And he's built their military back up again after that series of disasters in the Middle East. One more thing, gentlemen, said Garrison. He clicked on the computer and brought up several documents from the United States Department of Justice marked Top Secret, which he followed with more documents from the Department of Defense. Jesus, you guys must have every janitor and cleaning lady who empties a wastebasket in Washington, D.C. working for you, said Leach admiringly. It's more complicated than that, Admiral, said Garrison. Sometimes people die to get us these documents. Their people and ours. WPB get you most of this stuff? Asked Morgan. Some of it, sir, certainly. The circus has a very good crew in place in the district, no question, but most of it's our own CMI ops, said Garrison. 2 foreign intelligence agencies? Asked Basquine. Don't you ever duplicate one another's efforts? Garrison nodded. Sometimes, yes, sir, but that's a good thing, when we can confirm each other's intel. The only way a head of state like President Morehouse can ever find out how good his intelligence service really is the hard way, by having it fail him. Hence the duplication. The Republic uses both suspenders and belt. Anyway, the upshot of all these documents is that the old Fat Poe training school at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, is being reopened, and a large number of personnel from the Army, the Marine Corps, the 6 or 7 secret police agencies, and a number of law enforcement agencies around the USA are going to be attending a 6-week course beginning next week. They call this Operation Chain Link, and the whole thing is so hush-hush that the details and actual nature of the mission aren't even being committed to paper or computer drives. It's apparently only being discussed verbally by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the American Cabinet, and the White House. These picked personnel will be trained by former FATPO officers and FBI agents, and also by a number of former Israeli military personnel. "They're reviving FATPO?" laughed Basquine. "Hell of a lot of good those sons of bitches did them during the war." "I remember, sir," said Garrison, a former NVA man himself. "How many of them?" asked Morgan. "About 3,000, said Garrison. "If they were planning on invading the Republic, I think they know us well enough to get that they'd need a lot more than 3,000 fatty thugs with 6 weeks of training to keep us down," chuckled Morgan. 30,000 of the assholes couldn't do it back in the day." "No, sir," said Garrison. "But according to what we've been able to learn, General, this 6-week event is actually an instructor's course. These first 3,000 are being taught to train others. The main intakes start early in the summer and will include drafts from what they call community activist groups, meaning non-white street gangs from the cities, as well as elements from the Mexican and Aztec military, including the assault guards. The documents also refer to the formation of Israeli expat units serving under their own officers, many of them personnel from the old Mossad and the Shin Bet secret police. Finally, there is to be a unit called the Sacred Band, named after a probably mythical ancient Greek force of charioteers and spearmen who supposedly were all homosexual lovers. Apparently, the purpose of this grotesque thing is to prove once and for all that so-called gay people can be military effectives, which will do wonders to nail down the gay vote for Hunter Wallace for the November election. "And how many people will these main intakes consist of?" asked Morgan. "They've budgeted, and they're gearing up for 200,000 men, sir," replied Garrison quietly. "They are building a permanent, paramilitary army of occupation for the Northwest, commanded by some of the most experienced killers and torturers in the world. I can't see them going to this kind of effort and expense if they didn't intend to use it." There was a long silence around the table. "Jesus, John," said Leach after a while. "They may really be coming for us this time. I get a bad vibe off in this, boys," said Morgan, shaking his head. "Okay, here's what we do. First thing tomorrow, I want the entire strategic planning staff from all 3 services in the war room. We will do a complete rework of Plan 16, based on the assumption of a combined American, Canadian, and Aztec full-bore invasion attempt sometime this summer, probably in June. These so-called war games of theirs are scheduled to begin on June 12th, and I suspect those uniformed time servers and bureaucrats in the Pentagon still remember enough basic military strategy to go for a quick victory in the summer and not let it drag on into a winter war, especially east of the Cascades. Nobody in his right mind wants to fight in Montana or the Sawtooth in the dead of winter and meet our best generals, General January and General February. We will rework Plan 16 into Plan 17 on the basis of that assumption and begin making our dispositions." "When do we call up the reserves, John?" asked Leach. "Not until we get something more solid. I have hopes that may come soon. There's an intelligence operation pending through the War Prevention Bureau. Colonel, thanks for your report, and I'll want to talk to you later about this information and make sure I understand all the ramifications. But right now I need to discuss something with my comrades here that's a bit above your clearance level. No offense." "None taken, sir," said Garrison, standing up. "First rule of intelligence, no one can reveal what they don't know. I use it all the time." He saluted the officers and left the room. Morgan turned to the other 2. "I was at a security briefing at Longview House a couple of days ago," he told them. "Charlie Randall was there. He says, good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, the circus may finally have a shot at placing an asset of ours in the White House, right next to the President of the United States himself." At the same time, the senior officers of the military were meeting at Fort Lewis, down in the capital city of Olympia. A lieutenant in the Civil Guard parked his alcohol-fueled private car and walked into a nondescript 3-story office building on a quiet side street. There was no sign outside the building indicating its occupants or purpose, and all of the blinds in the windows were closed, despite it being a sunny, windy spring day outside. The guardsman was alert and observant enough to spot the discreetly placed surveillance cameras covering the entire street, but otherwise everything was as quiet as a ghost town. He walked through the front door and into the building's lobby, which was bare except for a desk behind which sat an elderly man in a shabby suit and tie that looked about 40 years old. It was dark in the lobby, and the old man was reading a Dostoevsky novel in the pool of light cast by a green-shaded banker's lamp onto the desk. The young cop glanced up and saw some slits in the wall high above his head. He was reasonably sure someone was behind those slits, covering the lobby with a rifle or automatic weapon. He walked up to the old man. "Good afternoon. Guard Lieutenant Robert Campbell to see the ringmaster." He expected the old man to be impressed, but he merely pressed a button under the desk. "Wait here a minute. They'll send somebody to escort you. Aren't you even going to ask me for my ID?" asked Lieutenant Campbell, surprised. "Son, anybody trying to sneak in here would have letter-perfect ID. Good enough to fool me and good enough to fool a scanning machine," said the old man with a snort. "Our security system is simple." He flicked aside his blue serge jacket to show a pistol in a shoulder holster. "We're all packing. We make sure that anybody who gets in who ain't who or what he says he is, don't come out again. Beyond that, we don't worry much about it. We got the gods on our side." Campbell had already spotted blue, white, and green old NVA ribbon on the man's lapel, and even though it wasn't necessarily required by protocol to stand to attention in the presence of a former volunteer, he straightened up. "Yes, sir, we do," he said. Then he saw a second ribbon on the receptionist's other lapel, all red and containing the tiny Roman numeral 16th. He gulped. "You fought in Coeur d'Alene during the 16 days, sir?" he asked. "I did," replied the old man. "Here's your guy." A side door opened, and a young man Bob's own age in shirt sleeves and tie stepped out and beckoned. He did not introduce himself. "Lieutenant Campbell? This way, please. He's waiting for you." "It's been an honor, comrade," said Bob Campbell to the man behind the desk, who was already back engrossed in the brothers Karamazov. He and his escort walked through a bullpen office full of desks and battered metal filing cabinets that could have been found in a freight company or a factory, if all the clerks of both sexes carried guns in hip or shoulder holsters. "I've never met a 16 days man before," remarked Bob to the escort. "That's Gus Singer's brother Al," the young man told him. There was a short elevator ride, and Campbell found himself being ushered into the large but Spartan office of the legendary General Charles Randall, director of the War Prevention Bureau, or the Circus, as it had come to be known, due to somebody in the NAR government who was a John le Carre fan. Some also maintained that the organization's nickname came from the death-defying feats its agents performed on a regular basis. Randall himself sat behind a large desk of varnished oak. He was not in uniform today, but wore a sports jacket and a loosely knotted maroon tie. He was a slim man in early middle age. His blonde, curly hair was beginning to pale at the temple, and some white hairs were now visible in his neatly trimmed beard. His desktop was almost painfully neat, with one in tray and one out tray, each filled with file folders. There was a black plastic telephone with multiple lines sitting on the desk that looked as if it had come from the previous century, and a green banker's lamp that might have been the twin of the one on the old man's desk out in reception. One wall of the office was lined with filing cabinets. Behind Randall's chair stood a Northwest tricolor flag in a stand, and beside it a small sideboard on which was a large glossy photograph of the famous Hollywood actress whom he had married, as well as a number of photographs of their children. The story of how Randall had met the actress was by now enshrined in the new nation's mythology. He had supposedly seduced her and turned her into an NVA intelligence asset, and used her to carry out Operation We Are Not. Amused, which was probably the most famous and spectacular guerrilla action the NVA ever pulled off. Campbell stood to attention and saluted. Randall flicked his own hand to his temple in casual acknowledgement and pointed to the chair in front of his desk. "Park it, Lieutenant." Randall was originally from Brisbane, and his accent was still heavily strine. Campbell did so. Randall reached into a drawer, rooted around and pulled out a file. Did you tell anyone you were coming here? No, sir, I was instructed not to. Good, said Randall. This entire meeting is covered by the Official Secrets Act. Neither you nor I are here. This building does not exist. All is a figment of an opium eater's nightmare. If one word of it gets out via anything you say or do, I will have your guts for garters, and I am not speaking figuratively. Got it? Got it, sir, confirmed Campbell. Randall was glancing through the file in his hand. No idea at all why I asked to see you. None, sir, although I applied for WPB 6 years ago, when I completed my military training. That's as close as I can guess. You grew up in Missoula, Randall continued. Your sister is former Northwest volunteer Jennifer Stockdale, and your brother-in-law is former volunteer Jason Stockdale, now Chancellor of the University of Montana. You completed your military service as a sergeant, you qualified as an expert marksman and demolition specialist, and you were rated as fluent in Spanish, which is now necessary to operate anywhere in the United States, never mind Aztlan. At the conclusion of your 2-year national service hitch, you were offered an appointment to the military academy at Sandpoint, but you chose to go into the Civil Guard instead. At the same time, you applied for both BOSS and the WPB. Why not become a regular, Lieutenant Campbell? First step to the SS. And why BOSS and WPB? My reasons will probably sound a bit infantile now, sir, admitted Campbell. The fact is that I always admired and idolized the hell out of Jenny and Jason's volunteer service during the War of Independence, and I guess I wanted to show that I could have my turn as well at the danger and adventure of covert ops in the service of the folk, that kind of thing. That's commendable, comrade, not infantile. You passed the WPB entrance examination with flying colors. Then 6 months later you withdrew your application before you could be assigned an intake number at the School of Intelligence, said Randall, reading over the file. Why did you drop out? WPB agents are not allowed to marry, and I decided to go ahead and start a family, Robert told him. Actually, that's not entirely correct, the Australian replied. In view of the nature of our work and the high potential for catastrophic work accidents in this organization, WPB agents are not allowed to marry without permission, which is sometimes granted, if only as a necessity for maintaining a couple's cover when they're operating out there. You say you withdrew your WPB application to start a family. Your people Christian? Or your wife's? Asked Randall. No, sir, I'm a National Socialist, and her family are traditional Catholics from Chicago who fled to the Republic a few months after Longview, said Campbell. My mother-in-law is religious, and she's got an angel thing going. The rest of them go to church on major festivals like Christmas and Easter and St. Wenceslas's Day. He's the patron saint of Bohemia, and the patron saint of beer as well, which is definitely appropriate in my wife's family, and they pretty much ignore it the rest of the time. I understand that because of our racial need to refill the cradles, as the party puts it. The Ministry of Culture has done everything possible to ease the stigma against illegitimacy, but nonetheless, I decided I was going to do things the old way and marry the mother of my child. Old-fashioned enough to give up a slot at, so I asked Randall. Campbell took a deep breath. No disrespect intended, sir, but when it came right down to it, I had a choice to go off spying and adventuring like the Scarlet Pimpernel on the one hand, leaving behind a young woman whom I loved and who would have been the mother of my son. Or I could take a pass on the Pimpernel path, stay home, and take responsibility for Millie and Bob III. That's my son's name, Robert Campbell III. I'm not sorry I went into the Guards instead. Where you did quite well, said Randall, perusing the file. Your station commander in Missoula recommended you for detective after 2 years on the beat. And there is not a bloody thing wrong with deciding to come home to a wife and child every night, instead of hiding in some flea-bag furnished apartment in Atlanta waiting for a phone call, or strangling some drunken ex-fatty in an alley in Houston and taking his wallet to make it look like a robbery to throw the cops off. The way of the Pimpernel is very much overrated. You understand I wouldn't be asking all these personal questions if it weren't relevant? Yes, sir. May I ask what this is all about? Randall closed the file and dropped it on his desk. All right, but before we get into that, Lieutenant, I want to tell you a couple of things. To begin with, just to grab your attention, There have been some recent intelligence developments that may indicate the Northwest Republic is facing a full-scale invasion by the United States, Canada, and Aztlan, with substantial military help from the People's Republic of China. Probably within the next few months. Campbell's blood ran cold. The real thing this time? Not just more posturing and wargaming and grab-assing on the border, sir? He asked. We think not, said Randall. We think this time they're coming to destroy us. Kill anyone who had anything remotely to do with the party or the War of Independence, deport most of the Republic's population to work camps in the Southwest and in Mexico itself, and enslave the remaining white population of the Northwest. Soviet-style internal passports and work permits, political loyalty boards without whose approval no one works or eats, federal regulations dictating what you can eat and what you can drive and what you can think, masses of armed niggers and beaners wearing federal badges patrolling the streets of Portland and Seattle again, and doing whatever they want, to anybody they want. This time it's the real thing. They're coming for us, and soon. I am telling you this first, so that you will understand that everything I have to say to you is deadly serious and vitally necessary to the survival of this republic and to the survival of our race on Earth. Because if we lose the republic, Lieutenant, that's it for us palefaces. Liberal think tanks in New York and Washington are already talking about what they will do when they succeed in destroying us. They call it eliminating racism through eliminating race by using science and medicine, mandatory sterilization, along with compulsory interracial marriage and breeding for those whites who aren't sterilized. Get the picture? I get it, Bob said. The Australian went on. The second thing you need to understand is that there is not a bloody thing romantic or adventurous about what we do in this department, although you've got the dangerous part down right enough. A lot of what we do is dishonest, treacherous, unpleasant, and in some cases downright vile, which is the nature of the spying game. We have to work with our hands up to our elbows in the backed-up toilet bowl of the soul, which is the United States of America, or in some cases Canada, where the only difference is the evil men and women who rule in the Jew's name say, a lot. I say this, Lieutenant, because the job I have for you is one of the bad ones. It is nothing short of filthy. Campbell scowled. Sir, I have 2 children and my wife is pregnant again. And now you tell me that the Americans are coming to make sure that those kids either die a horrible death now, or else they grow up to be slaves and junkies and whores. If I can stop that by jumping into a backed-up toilet, then I'll get as filthy as it takes. What exactly do you want me to do? I want you to be a presidential pimp, said Randall. I beg your pardon? Asked Bob, completely at sea. Let me break it down for you, Lieutenant Campbell, Randall said. The normal WPB course at the School of Intelligence on Whidbey Island is 9 months. The day after tomorrow at 0600 hours, I want you to report to the SOI, where you will be rushed through a special 10-day course which will spend about 14 hours per day teaching you the absolute bare essentials of what you have to know in order to be one of the Republic's spies and external enforcers. You want me to complete a 9-month course in 10 days? Asked Campbell incredulously. Got it in one, mate. We need to shove you into the game headfirst right now. Once you get your 10 days of training, you then get a false U.S. passport and a false American fleck card under a new identity. You will be issued another fleck card when you arrive on station in Washington, D.C., Station Cesspool. What? Asked Campbell, bemused. Station Cesspool, repeated Randall. Nickname for our D.C. operation, like calling the WPB itself the circus. The lads call New York City Station Shithole for the same reason. You're right in the belly of the beast in both those stations, up to your neck in a toilet that hasn't been flushed in about 200 years. Since you grew up in a sane white society, the things you will see and experience there may well drive you clinically insane. It's a problem we have with our ops out there. Sometimes they just can't take it anymore, and they go bonkers in spectacular ways. You can't go bonkers, though. You have to stay focused on your mission. Which is what? Asked Campbell. How much do you know about the President of the United States, Hunter Wallace? Asked Randall. Just what I read in the papers, said Campbell. The guy's a scumbag white traitor, but that's a given. As if any other kind of person could be elected to office in the United States. The last honest politician the United States ever produced was Andrew Jackson. I think I read somewhere that Hunter Wallace started out on the internet back in the teens. as a false flag blogger and a black op under the old Cass-Sunstein cognitive dissonance program. He gathered information for the regime and for the regime's NGOs like the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith and the Southern Poverty Law Center for money. As a reward for his cyber services, he was given a staff job in D.C. on some liberal congressman from Alabama's payroll. And the rest, as they say, is particularly repulsive history. "Go on," said Randall with a smile. Campbell shrugged and complied, worked his way up to the point where he was actually able to steal the Alabama congressman's seat from him, and from then on Wallace never looked back. He had just entered his second term when the War of Independence ended at Longview. He saw his bandwagon coming a mile off, and he jumped on it. From then on he was Mr. Reunification. His rap is an interesting combination of liberalism, neoconservatism, and Christian Zionism all rolled into one. He calls it One Nation Indivisible, and it's basically the social program of the Clinton Democrats, the unfettered economic buccaneering of the Wall Street banks, combined with the American exceptionalism of Rush Limbaugh and a heavy dash of 700 Club. I know that doesn't sound possible, or even coherent, but Wallace wraps it all in a big red, white, and blue American flag, and he pulls it off somehow. Everybody gets most of what they want, or they think they do. Wallace's one-note symphony for some years has been, we must recover America's lost jewels of the Northwest, punish wicked racism, and make everybody love and bugger one another under Old Glory regardless of race, creed, color, or species, all the while singing Kumbaya and praising Jesus. I know it's a lot more complex than that, sir, but that's what I hear. Not bad, said Randall with a nod. Pretty much tells the tale, that does, but there are some things you don't know. Hunter Wallace made a decision very early on in his life that he was going to make his fortune as a Shabazz goy, a Gentile gopher for the Jews. He wasn't recruited to work for cognitive dissonance on the internet, he volunteered. He heard about the program when it was leaked to the media as far back as 2010, when he contacted Cass-Sunstein and pestered him until Sunstein took him on. Wallace is a wretch, but he's no fool. He made a conscious decision at an early age that the Jews had the capacity to dispense to him the wealth and the power he craved, and he would do what he had to do for them in order to get it. He's never wavered from his decision since, and he's been well rewarded for it. He has always been in Jaime's hip pocket. Right now, his handler for the tribe is his White House press secretary, a former journalist named Angela Heron, real name Heronstein, born in Israel. Now, what do you know about the illustrious leader of the free world's, practices, I suppose you'd call them, with women? Robert frowned. I know Wallace isn't married, and part of his public persona is to be seen in public escorting all kinds of movie stars and female celebrities to political functions, public social events, concerts, baseball games, that kind of thing. Seems to me I read somewhere he actually charges money for his campaign committee and his private slush fund to escort somebody's daughter or wife to a public do and get their picture in the media. Is that the kind of practices with women you mean, sir? No, said Randall carefully. Bloody hell, I guess we are doing a good job in cleaning up the Republic's moral culture since the Revolution, if a lad of 26 has to have it spelled out for him. When I was your age, mate, our minds were right in the sewer all the time, so we didn't have far to fall. Anyway, President Hunter Wallace has a medical problem. Has had since he was young. Same problem a lot of white males of his generation have due to eating industrially produced and chemically enhanced food as a child and the general level of pollution and environmental contamination with every toxin under the sun that exists in the United States. Hunter Wallace suffers from what's known as hypogonadism, which is a fancy way of saying his nuts are the size of pencil erasers, his sperm count is 3 or 4 on a good day, and it's impossible for him to have normal sexual relations with a woman. And so he does what any rich and powerful American man does who can't have normal sexual relations with a woman. He has abnormal ones. I won't get into exactly what he does, since I just ate lunch. You will be briefed on that when the time comes. What? Asked Campbell incredulously. Look, sir, how can the sexual perversions of the President of the United States be relevant in any way to some mission I have to undertake for the circus? They are, I'm afraid, sighed Randall. This is where we get into the bad part. Look, mate, I'll tell you what I want you to do, and it's bloody important. It may be able to help us turn away this invasion we think is coming. But I'll say this up front. What I'm asking of you is a bloody filthy thing, and if you want to say no and walk right out that door, you're free to do so. I could order you to do it, but that wouldn't be any good. You'd hate every minute of it, you'd resent the hell out of the circus for making you do it, and you'd probably blow the mission. And that's not an option here. If you cannot, in conscience, help us with this, Lieutenant, then we'll find some other way.
Sir.
Right, I seem to be having difficulty getting to the point, probably because I don't really want to, said Randall with a sigh. Wallace goes through women on a regular basis about every 6 months, most likely because that's all most women can stand. Our DC station is able to monitor internal White House communications via email and phone, a lot of them anyway, and we know who Hunter Wallace has set his sights on as his next conquest, I guess you'd call her, only in his case it's more a command performance. She's 22 years old. She's got some half-assed patronage job as a publicist at some K Street political consulting firm, one of those American gigs where liberal birds with the right connections can draw $300,000 a year for doing bugger all. And she has the right connections? Asked Campbell. She does. Prominent Washington family, liberal Democratic pedigree going all the way back to Hubert Humphrey. Wallace saw this Sheila at some political drinky-do, and apparently fell head over heels in lust. If he follows his regular pattern, he's got about a month left with his current personal services assistant, which is the term they use at the White House for the boss man's bit of all right on the side, so he should pension her off with a cushy job at the Pentagon or the EPA or something, and make his approach to this new girl in about 4 weeks, say mid to late April. Before then, we need you to approach this woman, connect with her, and persuade her to work for us, to pass information to the circus from right inside the White House itself, literally pillow talk with the president. If he talks at all, which we don't know, we need you to act as this woman's handler, collect her raw intel and pass it on, keep track of her progress and keep her focused, keep her morale up, and keep her from going off the rails in the light of what this bastard Hunter Wallace will be doing to her in bed, which I repeat will be bloody abnormal, and enough to make a dog vomit. Yes, sir, you're right. It's a repulsive assignment. And yet getting an informant right next to the President of the United States is clearly something the Republic has to do. I'm in. And now the big question, continued Robert. Sir, why on God's green earth do you need me of all people to do something like this? Because you know the girl, Randall told him steadily. Huh? I mean, sir? Asked Robert, gaping, uncomprehending. Her last name is Halberstam, but that is her Jewish stepfather's name, Randall told him. She was born in Montana, and you knew her as a child. You knew her as Georgia Miles.